I guess at this point I don't have to say that GURPS is a generic system and has rules for basically everything. You probably all know how characters get injured and how they die, but what about objects? I remember being dissatisfied with how they were treated in D&D 3.5, and I like GURPS rules for damage to objects and breakage much better. Let's check them out. First, let's talk about the main characteristics of objects, that is HP, HT, DR and injury tolerance. Damage resistance usually is easy to figure out. Wood and plastic has DR2, small metal or metal and wood objects have DR4, and full metal melee weapons have DR6. But this is just a rule of thumb. If you are not sure, consult the item's description. GURPS Low-Tech Companion 2 says that armor is protected by its own DR at -1. Aside from DR, most objects have some sort of injury tolerance. Machines and other complex objects usually are unliving. Simple and homogeneous objects are, well, homogeneous, and flexible objects like nets are diffuse. Could there be an object without injury tolerance? GURPS Biotech has some biological gadgets, but would they be objects without injury tolerance? Or would they be creatures? I don't know, the line is blurry. If you know the object's injury tolerance and weight, you can calculate its HP. A typical unliving object has HP equal to 4 times cube root of its weight in pounds, and a typical homogeneous or diffuse object has HP equal to 8 times cube root of weight in pounds. In both cases, round up. If you do not have a calculator nearby, consider using the table on page 558 with pre-calculated values. If the object in question is a weapon, you can also use the table from GURPS Low-Tech Companion 2 that has DR and HP values for all low-tech weapons. For certain items such as armor, weight reduction for high quality does not affect HP. Finally, we need another attribute, HT. How do you even calculate it? Fortunately, GURPS Basic Set has some guidelines for you. Most machines and other complex objects have HT10, homogeneous and simple objects have HT12, cheap and poorly maintained items may have a penalty, while high-quality ones may have a bonus. I would assign fine items a +1 bonus to HT and very fine items a +2 bonus to HT. Now let's talk about how damage affects objects. Just like living creatures, they have certain damage thresholds. When an object has less than 1/3 HP left, its effectiveness is halved or otherwise reduced. This left up to the GM, but I don't really know how one would reduce effectiveness of, for example, melee weapons. For the most part, I think you can ignore this threshold unless you are dealing with complex machines or armor. At 0 HP or less, the mechanics are very similar to those of living creatures. Roll against the object's HT every second it is used under stress. On a failure, the object is disabled and probably won't function until repaired, unless it is a homogeneous object, in which case it might remain partially usable. I will talk about that a little bit later. At -1 times HP and below, the object must roll against HT to avoid destruction, just like living beings roll against HT to avoid death. On a failure, the object is destroyed and cannot be used anymore. At -5 times HP, the object is automatically destroyed. The rules seem to stop at this, but the damage to shields box also mentions that at -10 times HP, the object is completely destroyed. If you are using the rules for damage to armor from GURPS Low-Tech Companion 2, then armor that has been damaged to have less than 1/3 of its HP gives the wearer half its original DR rounded down, and the penalty to target chinks in armor becomes 1 lower. Armor at 0 HP or less requires a roll against HT12 every second to see if it falls off. If you roll a critical failure, the armor partially detaches, making your movements awkward. Torso armor gives -1 to dexterity, limb armor restricts limb movement, effectively crippling them, and the helmet blocks your sight, but I assume protects your eyes now. Even if armor doesn't fall off, the penalty to target chinks is decreased by 2. So now that we have these damage thresholds worked out, let's talk about the special rules for shields and weapons. If a shield is disabled or destroyed, it no longer provides its defense bonus, but it still encumbers you until dropped. If it is completely destroyed, it falls off. As for weapons, these rules are much more varied. They can be found on page 485. If a weapon is destroyed, it is useless, but if it is merely disabled, it may be partially usable still. This does not apply to weapons weighing 1 pound or less, or missile weapons. For the rest of the weapons, when a weapon is disabled, you have to roll 1d and consult the text. For example, an axe has a chance of the head breaking off and leaving you with a light club. Pole arms may transform into staves of different length and clubs. Rapiers become small swords and small swords become daggers, and so on. Honestly, I'm surprised that these detailed rules are in the basic set instead of something like Low-Tech Companion. This is pretty cool, and I remember these rules actually coming up in my games. Now let's talk about the rules for weapon breakage some more. How can you break a weapon? There are 3 situations: breakage on a parry, breakage when attacked, and breakage when attacking. First, let's see the breakage on a parry rules. These rules can be found on page 376 of GURPS basic set. If you use a weapon to parry anything 3 or more times its own weight, your weapon may break. If the weapon being parried is 3 times heavier, then the chance of breakage is 2 in 6. Each whole multiple adds +1. Thus, a weapon 4 times heavier gives you a 3 in 6 chance, and so on. Weapon quality and material may adjust these odds further. Even if your weapon breaks, the parry still counts unless the odds exceeded 6 in 6. For the purpose of breakage, a punch, kick or bite has an effective weight on 1/10 of its attacker's strength. And slams of all kinds use full ST, thus parrying a slam is rarely a good idea. Now let's talk about attacking weapons to break them. For this purpose, you have to remember that the opponent's weapon is usually extended in front of him, so you don't always have to be able to reach the opponent himself. Also, you can always strike at a reach 2 or higher weapon on your first turn after it was used to attack or feint against you. Reach C melee weapons and pistols are at -5 to hit. Reach 1 melee weapons and medium-sized firearms are at -4 to hit. Anything larger is at -3 to hit. The opponent can dodge or parry, but only with the weapon that was targeted. He cannot block, and the shield doesn't even provide its usual defense bonus against such attacks. That's something I didn't know before. GURPS Low-Tech Companion 2 expands these rules a little bit by introducing rules for cutting cords, chains and bowstrings. This is done at an additional -3 penalty. The benefit is that the cord only has DR 1, and any damage that penetrates this DR is tripled for the purpose of injury. Basically, this is an attack at the vitals of the weapon. Chains also are targeted at -3 but are treated as diffuse objects and have full DR. Finally, we have rules for breaking weapon on an attack. They are not in the basic set but in GURPS Low-Tech Companion 2. When striking a target that has non-flexible DR 3 or higher, a weapon used with ST that's at least double its AST stat has a 2 in 6 chance of breaking. Add +1 to these odds per additional whole numbered ST multiple and modify for quality and material just like you do for weapon breakage on a parry. A cheap weapon may break against such DR even when used with ST that at least equal to its ST stat. Base odds are 0 in 6, which doesn't make sense. I think the book meant that when you use a cheap weapon with ST equal to its ST stat, the odds of breakage are 1 in 6. The attack that broke the weapon still counts unless the odds of breakage exceeded 6 in 6. You probably have noticed that these rules do not really interact with the rules for damage to objects. If your weapon breaks on a parry, is it disabled or destroyed? How much HP does it lose? The rules in GURPS Low-Tech Companion 2 tell you to consult the broken weapon box in the basic set to learn what happens to the weapon after it breaks, which seems to imply that the weapon becomes disabled, not destroyed. This means that the broken weapon drops to 0 HP. These rules are quite detailed. What if you want something simpler? Then you can use the quick and dirty weapon damage rules from GURPS Low-Tech Companion 2. What if you want something even more detailed? Then you have the Broken Blade article from Pyramid 387. Douglas Cole, the author of this article, also has a blog post on how to expand the article with rules for shield breakage. The link is in the description. And that's it. I think these rules add a lot to the game, but they also add a lot of bookkeeping and micromanagement, so I understand why some players or GMs wouldn't want to use them. But in any case, Thank you for watching, I will see you next time.